Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Champions of Inspiration. I'm your host, Scott Schilling. It's going to be a great show because of the purpose behind the show. Uh, Tiffany Martschink is a 24-year military veteran in the Army, now retired. 20. Thank you for 24 years of service, by the way. Uh,
Absolutely.
but she has created a podcast, which, quite frankly, more people need to know about, more people need to promote and really understand. It's called Medal of Honor Podcast, and between the podcast and the website, it really is to provide a means of hope and encouragement, along with the resources and the things needed for military and veteran families and communities. So, Tiffany, thanks for coming to Champions of Inspiration.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about the Medal of Honor podcast and uh, what you're working to do with that.
Well, the purpose of it is, like you said, is to, well, I'll even backtrack and tell you why I started it. I was going through some counseling at the VA, some mental health counseling, and the psychologist that I was working with said that I needed to find something that I was interested in. And sarcastically, I said, "There's nothing out there. There's nothing out there for me. I don't enjoy that I would enjoy." But as I stepped back and I thought about it, I enjoy connecting with people and having conversations, especially within the military and veteran community. And I can't exactly go down to a restaurant, sit down at a table and say, "Hey, how you doing? Tell me your story." That doesn't quite work out right. So I tried a podcast. And I will backtrack and even say, I don't listen to podcasts. Never have. Maybe one or two, and that was it. I never had done a podcast either, so it was all new to me, but I was willing to step out and try it. And the purpose of it was not just to connect with people, but to provide a platform for service members, veterans, and their family members to be able to tell their story, whatever that looks like. So it
Well,
doesn't matter to me if they served for 3 years or 30 years, and what branch doesn't matter either, or what their job was. They have a story to tell. So I wanted to provide a platform for each person to share their story.
and I think that that's number one, admirable, and the stories are part of the healing process. They're part of a lot of different things, but part of that comes from your story being so unique. I mean, you were mobilized and activated three times: Iraqi Freedom, Noble Eagle, and Enduring Freedom. And across your 24 years in the military, you had quite a variety of differing experiences, correct?
Correct, I did.
And so those are some of the things because of your own experiences. Like you said, you were working with a counselor. Um, share a little bit of that if you would.
Sure. So during the military, and this is at the end of my career, I experienced what is called an MST, which stands for military sexual trauma. There's many people out there, men and women, who have experienced this, and because of that, I started getting counseling while I was still in. So that's what brought me in to even start getting the counseling, was because I ended up developing PTSD from that experience, which I am still to this day. It happened 5 years ago, but I'm still to this day going through counseling as I continually progress through that healing journey.
Well, I think that that's I don't think we who have not served or we who have not been in the military construct, there's so many different things that are so vastly different than quote unquote real life, right? The normal everyday things. So the possibility of PTSD, whether that being because you were attacked in battle or whether you were sexually assaulted on base, there's so many different things that need to be addressed or probably should be addressed, right? With
Right.
veterans and the veteran community, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I will say, too, that the military doesn't own the term PTSD. And I say that because I'll even use 9/11 as an example. If I am a civilian in New York City and I stop in on that Tuesday morning to a Starbucks with a coworker and we step out and we see a plane hit a building, one of the two of us or both of us can have PTSD from that experience. So the military doesn't exactly own the term PTSD, but that's where we normally associate it with somebody in the military who deployed overseas and lost a buddy, had their a limb blown off. That's what we generally associate it with. But PTSD is simply what the name says. It's a traumatic event happened in your life, and there is stress that is continuing in your life at well after the event occurred. So that's, I think most people in the military are familiar with it, if whether it's because of their own diagnosis or somebody that they know.
And and again, something that maybe the average everyday person who hasn't been in the military or hasn't been around veterans or those who have served don't realize how far reaching that is, number one,
Mm-hmm.
but how detrimental it is. I mean, from the
Mm-hmm.
standpoint of people losing hope, and where there is no hope, life has a hard time going on. And so,
Yes.
a big part of sharing the stories is to um, kind of open up that path to hope again, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And the thing that's key about that too is with PTSD, you may not see outward bruises, a missing limb. You may not see scars on a person, but just because they physically look okay doesn't mean that they aren't dealing with some sort of mental health issue, whether it's PTSD, depression, anxiety, bipolar, whatever the issue may be. Just because they look physically okay does not mean mentally they are.
So, how, again, I noticed as a going through your thing, you're also trained um, as a um, suicide. I don't know how to, what's the right way to say it?
So there's a course that I went through that was done by Living Works, and it's called ASSIST, which stands for Applied Suicide Intervention Training. And I guess if I were to label it and give it like what kind of training is this, it's suicide intervention. And so it teaches you how to intervene in somebody's life who might be contemplating suicide. There may be somebody standing on the edge of a bridge ready to jump or have a weapon in their hand ready to use it. And it could be a weapon being either a gun, a knife, whatever the case may be. So that suicide intervention training gives you the skills that you need to hopefully deter that person from going down that path of suicide.
I know that you and I were talking prior to the show last time we spoke about suicide, and it's not that former service members have a desire to commit suicide. They simply don't see, in many cases, they
Mm-hmm.
simply don't see an alternative. Correct?
Correct. And it's hard to give an accurate statistic for this because many people who attempt suicide do wind up dying. So I can't really provide an accurate number of what that looks like. But the majority of people who attempt suicide don't actually want to die. They just don't know how to get the help that they need for the issue that they're dealing with. So when you are in that dark, cold place and you can't do anything but look up, sometimes suicide appears to be the only solution to deal with your particular issue. So that ends up the route that people go in attempting suicide. One episode that I recently published, this service member, she retired recently from the army, and she shared her experience to where she said she had a detailed plan laid out as to how she was going to commit suicide, when and where she was going to do it, but ended up not following through with it. And one thing that she said that I thought was so key was she said, just because I didn't go through it with it does not mean that I'm okay. It just means I didn't actually go through with the plan. she said, I still needed help and I had to seek out that help. Whether it's talking to a close friend, going to an emergency room, talking to a mental health professional, there's a lot of resources out there. And she was able to take advantage of those resources instead of following through with that plan that she had set out for her.
Again, I know there are other organizations that have been established. I believe 22 Kill came from the unfortunate fact that 22 former service members a day were committing suicide simply
Yes.
because they lost hope, lost encouragement, didn't know a different alternative, things like that. How can we uh, come together through your show or working alongside you to help service members understand how much we do appreciate their sacrifices for us and that there is hope, that there is possibility going forward.
Absolutely. And one thing that I think is amazing, or I wanted to say crazy, but sometimes when we talk about mental health, saying the word crazy is not accurately or not
Probably not
fitting.
the best choice.
Right. But something interesting that I've noticed is when it comes to um, injuries, if there's a physical injury, we do such an amazing job of trying to one up each other. You know, somebody might say, man, you're not going to believe it. I broke my leg in 3 places. I mean, that's pretty bad, and here's how it happened. And then the other person's going to say, oh, yeah, I got you one better. I may have only broken my leg in one place, but I have 40% of my body that's burnt because of an IED. Top that. But then when it comes to mental health, we don't want to do a one upper on that. We don't even want to talk about it because it's such a taboo topic. And I think especially in the military, that's the case anywhere, but I think especially in the military, one of the things that a lot of people look at is with certain jobs, you need a certain level of security clearance. And with that, if you have some sort of mental health issue, there's a misconception that if I talk about having a mental health issue, I'm going to lose my clearance. And if I lose my clearance, I'm going to lose this job and I'm going to have to do something else in the military or leave the military altogether. So that right there reinforces the fact that I shouldn't talk about my mental health. But that's actually just a myth. It's not the case. My security clearance might get looked at, but if I'm getting help for that mental health issue, I don't need to worry about it. I'm getting help and I'm going to get better. Just like you wear a cast for a little bit, your leg is going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so are there some examples from some of the shows you've done, or are there some stories, obviously, without divulging anything that you that shouldn't be? But are there any, success stories, any comeback stories, anything that people have shared on the Medal of Honor podcast that more people need to know about?
Oh my goodness. I would say there's about I don't know, 86 examples. I mean, because that's how many episodes about that I've done, and I love the fact that every story is unique and not the same as somebody else's. I had two different Air Force A-10 Warthog pilots that were on the show. They were both amazing stories, and while their job was similar, their stories are different. So that's what I love about it because the military is a great like hodgepodge of America. It's such a diverse group, and even just one branch is diverse, but when you put all the branches together, it's like a family and the stories are just endless. But one story I would say that sticks out as it relates to mental health and sexual assault. Well, there's two of them actually, but the most recent one published was a female was sexually assaulted, and she has since started her own nonprofit organization called Voices Against Sexual Assault. And she also pursued a master's degree in counseling, and she is now a counselor. So she has turned something bad that happened to her into something good. There's also, actually, believe it or not, a male that was raped. And I think when we hear the word rape, we automatically assume that there's a male perpetrator against a female victim. But that's not always the case. A male or a female can be raped. And this male, he was in the Navy and was gang raped over a period of about 10 months
Wow.
while he was out to sea. He reported it immediately, but he was told, because he joined the Navy when he was 17. So this first assignment that he went to, he was probably still a teenager. And so when he went to go report it, his command kind of blew him off and said, "No, that's not what was happening. You probably misunderstood it." And he was so distraught that he went AWOL and then was kicked out of the military for going AWOL. But he has since, during that time, and I guess I'll just say you have to listen to the episode to catch the full story. But now he goes around to the Army, Air Force, and Navy and teaches an annual sexual assault training to those who are still in the military. So he not only gets to share the statistics and the process of how you can file a complaint, but he can also talk from experience. And I think having his story shared on a podcast lets other people know there might be other men out there who experience the sexual assault but are afraid to report it because, well, that's emasculating. I don't want to talk about, me getting raped because it just doesn't happen to men. But it does, and it's okay. Not that getting raped is okay, but it's okay to go and talk to somebody about it because you need to get those issues addressed. And there's no shame in saying, "Hey, look, I need some help."
Yeah, I congratulate anybody that comes forward with a less than positive story and turns their mess into their message and their test into their testimony.
There's
And
even, oh, absolutely, I love it too. And that's why, and I'll backtrack. There's a story that was shared last summer that has absolutely nothing to do with mental health or suicide. But he was, prior to joining the military, he was kind of his life was going down the wrong path. And he said that the military saved his life because if he wasn't in the military, he was going to be in jail. His father died when he was a freshman in high school. He ended up having to drop out of high school so that he could serve in the military. And so when he did that, he got his GED. And not only did he get his GED, he joined the military, served maybe, I don't know, 11 years. And 11 years later, he entered the military with a GED, and he left with a master's degree. Started his own recording business, and is doing amazing things. So that's another example of a positive story that was shared. It's not all the episodes are not about mental health or suicide, but I just kicked off this series called Take a Knee with Tiffany, and there's 15 people, and this is what I love about it, 15 people who were not only willing to come onto a podcast, but they're willing to tell the world, here's something that happened to me, whether it's a physical assault, sexual assault, dealing with a mental health issue, dealing with struggles of suicide. 15 people were willing to come on and share that story and say, hey, here's a piece of me, and it's a not so happy piece of me. But as they tell those stories, there's healing as they share the story. And then as people listen to it, they can listen to it and say, okay, you know what? If that guy got help, so can I. If she talked about it, then so can I. And that's what I hope ends up happening is people can listen to these stories and gain a bit of confidence and hope knowing that they can make it too.
So where can people listen to the Medal of Honor podcast?
Well, it's on 7 or 8 different platforms. It's Spotify. The big ones are Spotify, Apple, Google, Radio Public, uh, Overcast. But if a person goes to anchor.fm
Hmm.
and then backslash Medal of Honor, you'll be able to see all the platforms it's available on.
Wonderful. Yeah. This show will also go to Anchor and then Spotify and Apple and many, many, many others.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, on the audio side, it will go to over 100 video networks. Because again, we want to get more following for the Medal of Honor podcast. The work that you're doing is tremendously important. Again, giving hope, giving inspiration, giving encouragement, quite frankly, pointing people in the right direction for the resources. And again, it's you're you're doing it as a former service member, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. But also because you've needed it yourself. And there's got to be a different level of empathy because you're not reporting on something, you're sometimes reliving something, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And this podcast, one thing that I tell a lot of people is I went and bought a Yeti microphone, spent almost $100 for a microphone, and as I stood in line to pay for it, I just thought, I'm about to spend upwards of $100 for a microphone for a podcast that's going to last for 4 or 5 episodes, 10 at best. And then I'm going to tuck the microphone away, put it in a drawer, it's going to collect dust, and it'll just be a reminder of something that I tried. Normally, and for me, even saying it that way is a bit of improvement on my language because I it used to be I would say, and that would be one more thing that I failed at doing. But it's not about failing. You never know what it's going to look like until you try it. And the relationships that I have built with people just from doing a podcast has been amazing. I never knew that it would still be going on a year and a half later, which is where I'm at right now. I didn't think it was still going to be happening. And I just thought I was going to record episodes and then move on and never talk to the person again. And for many of the people, the relationship is still somebody that appeared on my podcast, and I was the one that hosted it. And we may be connected on social media, but there are some of the people that I still remain in contact with that I would have never met had I not done this podcast. So it's amazing how things pan out if you just step out and try something. It'll either work or it won't, but you never know till you try.
Absolutely. In fact, you and I realized that we have a mutual friend in Brian Fleming,
Yes.
who is a double Purple Heart recipient, along with all sorts of other things, because he was not blown up once by an IUD. He was blown up twice.
Mm-hmm.
He got blown up, got healed, and went back and got blown up again. And his moniker is the blown up guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian and I have become good friends here in Dallas. And in fact, his Purple Heart license plates are nice try. If you can't come out with a sense of humor after getting blown up twice, I don't know what you have. But I
Mm-hmm.
so tremendously respect him for his path and what he's done. And he's a resiliency coach.
Mm-hmm.
He goes and talks to organizations about exactly that. How are you resilient when you're facing all these kinds of things? So again, I tremendously respect you and what you're doing from the standpoint of taking your mess and turning it into a message and
Mm-hmm.
really giving other people that opportunity as well. We want to do what we can do here at Champions of Inspiration to direct more people to the podcast, um, because they got to hear the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like you say, every individual has their own story, and those stories have the ability to be of service to somebody else. So it's a service
Mm-hmm.
member serving again one more
Mm-hmm.
time. Quoted many shows, Mother Teresa always said, if you can't feed 100, feed one. Well, the concept behind that is pretty simple. You don't know which story is going to affect which
Mm-hmm.
person. And quite frankly, all it takes is affecting one.
Yes.
And you've done something pretty special.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting to wind down on time. Hard to believe we've gone through that already.
Oh wow.
What do you want everybody to know through this experience and what you're doing?
Oh my gosh, you should have asked me that question first, because I could have run my mouth on that. I can run my mouth on just about anything, but I think the biggest thing that I would tell people is even though the guests on the show are service members, are military related, does not mean that you have to be in the military to listen to them. When it comes to mental health and suicide, that impacts everybody. So I would just encourage people that whether you're in the military or not, listen to them. Because, like you said, there could be a single story that could impact you in a way that you never thought possible. So I would encourage everybody to listen in. And for the people who are experiencing some sort of mental health issue and they're not getting help from it, go get some help. If getting that help is nothing but talking to somebody that you trust, then go talk to somebody that you trust. There is no shame in asking for help, not at all. So I would just encourage anybody who is experiencing any of these things to go and ask for help. Even if you have to go to the emergency room and talk to the triage nurse and say, hey, look, my world's upside down right now. I need somebody to talk to. I mean, what will it do? It won't hurt you. It'll help you. And with the podcast, again, all the stories are not related to mental health or suicide, but I promise you listen to them and you will just be amazed at stories. Whether it's a story like Brian Fleming's or there's a Marine that he was a Marine Corps officer, an infantry officer, who similarly he deployed overseas, got blown up. Apparently that wasn't good enough for him, so he deployed again. And the way he says it is, yeah, I was supposed to go right, I went left, and I lost my leg. Or, whatever the story is. And it could be something that has nothing to do with the deployment. Whatever story you listen to, I'm sure that there's something that you can get out of it. So I would encourage you just to listen to some of these episodes, check them out, and hopefully you'll get something that you can walk away with that you would have not gotten had you not listened.
Absolutely. So again, Medal of Honor podcast, go to anchor.fm. You can also find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other places. And you also have a website that, again, provides resources and contact information. What's the website that people can reach you at and learn more?
It's the word gap dash medalofhonor.org. And I do want to clarify for people who may not be thinking about this, the word mettle is METTLE, which is the word that means resilience and strength and courage to press forward. So it's not metal like that piece of metal or the Medal of Honor that people are awarded in the military, but it's medalofhonor.org. And just because that's what these guests display. They display that mettle and that courage and that resiliency to push forward no matter what the obstacle is that they're encountered with.
Fabulous. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being on Champions of Inspiration. And thank you again for your service, everything you're doing, for what you've done in the past and everything you're doing now and going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for joining us on Champions of Inspiration. We'll see you again, same time tomorrow. God bless.